27 years ago, a man named Marco saved two little children from a flood. They grew up thinking about Marco with every rainfall and hoped to repay him someday. They were only 6 years old at that time, but they never forgot how Marco risked his life for them. And Marco never forgot about them either. But never in his life had he expected ever to hear from them again, until today. But before we start, make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. As Marco grabbed the mail out of his mailbox, one letter caught his attention. It was handwritten and got a familiar postal stamp. He headed inside and immediately opened the letter. He gasped as he read what it said. The letter wasn't signed with names on the bottom, but Marco instantly knew who had written it. The letter said to meet where he last spoke to the twins he had saved. So, he packed his bags, loaded up his car, and began the long drive back to his old town. But how did the twins find Marco? Why did they want to meet up? And how will they repay him? Marco still remembers the flood like it was yesterday. He had always been a heavy sleeper, so when the rain began to pour down in the early hours, he didn't hear it at first. It wasn't until the screams from the street below woke him up that he realized something could be very wrong, and he quickly got up. He immediately ran downstairs to help his neighbors. As he reached the ground floor, he noticed something strange. His feet were wet, and not just a little damp, but completely soaked through. "What the heck?" Marco cussed. The water was seeping through the front door, coming in at an alarming rate. "Oh, no, no, no," Marco panicked. Panic set in as he realized he couldn't stop the water from entering his house. So instead, he decided to go outside and see if anyone else might need his help. As he made his way through the floodwaters, he suddenly heard a faint sound coming from the distance. It sounded like a child crying. He saw a little boy and girl clinging to the trunk for dear life. Marco knew he had to act fast. He carefully walked toward the children, fighting against the strong current as he went. Finally, he reached the children and pulled them to safety. They were shivering and scared, but alive. Marco wrapped them in a blanket and waited with them until help arrived. Today was the 27th anniversary of that flood. It had changed the course of many lives. He rebuilt his life, never forgetting about the little twins he had saved that day. Because 27 years later, Marco got a mysterious letter in the mail, and it could only mean one thing. The letter read as follows: "Dear Marco, we've been searching for you ever since we could comprehend what happened that day. We never got to say thank you, and we wanted to find a way to repay you. So let's meet up where we last spoke." Marco couldn't believe his eyes. They hadn't forgotten about him after all those years. He wiped a tear from his eye and thought back about that day. Where did I last speak to them, he thought, but he quickly remembered. The bus stopped next to the fallen down tree. He quickly packed his bags and loaded his car. It was a long drive to his old town, and he didn't want to waste a second. Marco's heart raced as he pulled up to the bus stop. He slowly stepped out of his car and looked around. Everything looked so different now. The trees had grown taller and the buildings had been renovated, but there was one thing that remained the same after all those years: the fallen down tree. Marco walked over to the tree and brushed his hand over its bark. He thought back to that day and wondered what would have happened if he hadn't gone outside to help the others. Just as he was lost in thought, he heard a voice calling his name. He turned around and saw two people walking towards him. It was the twins. They were all grown up now, but Marco recognized them instantly. They walked over to him with big smiles on their faces, and Marco couldn't help but smile too. They hugged each other tightly, tears streaming down their faces. "We've been searching for you for so long," the twins said. "We wanted to thank you properly for what you did for us that day." Marco smiled, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. "You don't have to thank me. I did what any decent person would do." But the twins disagreed. They shook their heads and smiled. "Well, let us introduce ourselves properly first," the woman said. "I'm Sophia, and this is Matteo." Marco sighed. After all those years, he finally knew their names. They went to a little restaurant close to the bus stop and continued talking there. After dessert, Matteo invited them on a brief tour. They visited a few nearby structures, marvels of modern engineering. "Each building is flood-resistant," Matteo explained with pride. Marco was amazed. The buildings weren't just functional, they were works of art. Matteo's vision had truly transformed the town. At a local park, a few individuals approached Sophia, their faces lighting up with recognition. They shared touching tales of recovery, gratitude evident in their words. "Sophia helped me find my way after the flood," one woman shared, her voice thick with emotion. Marco realized Sophia's impact was deeply rooted in the community. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Marco spoke of his old house. "I had so many memories there," he said wistfully. Matteo and Sophia exchanged a look, clearly knowing more about the house than they let on. "Last we heard, someone bought it and began renovations," Matteo offered vaguely. Marco's eyes widened, curiosity piqued, but he didn't press further. Night began to fall, and the trio embarked on a walk. As they settled on a park bench, Sophia began, "After the flood, we never forgot you, Marco." Matteo nodded. "We searched for years." They recounted journeys to different towns, following whispers and rumors, all in hopes of finding their savior. Marco was moved beyond words, realizing the depth of their gratitude. As they walked, familiar streets began to unfold. Marco's heartbeat quickened. He recognized the lane leading to his old house. Marco marveled at the transformation, realizing time's power to heal and rebuild. As they walked, Mrs. Baxter, an old neighbor, called out, "Marco, is that really you?" They embraced, and others joined, a reunion of old friends. The town had not forgotten its hero, and every handshake, every hug was a testament to enduring friendships. Sophia, glancing at Matteo, mentioned, "We found an old envelope addressed to you in the rubble." Marco's brow furrowed. "An envelope?" Standing at the end of the lane, Marco gazed at where his house once stood. Memories flooded back, family dinners, childhood games, and lazy Sunday afternoons. Rounding the corner, the sight took Marco's breath away. His old house, standing proud and majestic, renovated to its former glory. The windows sparkled, the brickwork looked pristine, and a freshly painted door welcomed them. With a shared glance, the twins beckoned Marco. "Let's have a look inside, shall we?" Sophia suggested. Entering, Marco was consumed by a cocktail of nostalgia and curiosity, wondering who had breathed life back into his ancestral home. Walking through, Marco noticed that many of the original features were preserved. The ornate banisters, the mosaic floor tiles, even his grandmother's chandelier in the living room. In the center of the living room, Sophia handed Marco the mysterious envelope. Inside, a photo of the house in ruins and a heartfelt note revealing their grand gesture. "This is our way of saying thank you," read Matteo, eyes shimmering with emotion. The twins had not only saved his house, but they had also saved a piece of his soul. "We're family now," Sophia whispered, the sentiment echoing in each heartbeat. The trials of the past had culminated in this beautiful, poignant moment. In the backyard, a young sapling awaited. Together they planted the tree, symbolizing hope, growth, and the promise of new memories. Marco's legacy, intertwined with the twins, would now grow for generations. As dusk settled, they spoke of the future. Marco mused about returning to his ancestral roots, while the twins spoke of their commitment to the town's resilience. The promise of staying connected, of building a shared future, was the underlying theme. As they parted ways, the stars shone a little brighter, bearing witness to a bond forged from past trials and tribulations. While memories of the flood would never fade, the trio looked forward to new horizons, united in hope and gratitude.